Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy the full story. She's a good kid, or at least that's what I thought when I turned on the lawnmower that bright Saturday morning. The Briggs & Stratton engine roared to life with just one tug of a starter cord. I glanced at the 2-year-old girl strapped into her car seat on her new porch. She looked at me and smiled. The sun was high in the sky, and the temperature was already over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, even though it was barely 9 a.m. The famous Texas heat was apparently everything it was cracked up to be. I had already changed into a tank top and shorts to tackle the overgrown forest that called itself the lawn in front of our new home in suburban Dallas. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be a single parent living in Texas on the cutie, I would have laughed at you. But that's how it was. When I first made my way across the overgrown lawn, it seemed like I was always looking over my shoulder, both figuratively and literally. I was literally looking over my shoulder to make sure my daughter was okay. I moved the car seat far enough away from the edge so that I didn't have to worry about her motions causing the seat to fall off the low porch. I also did it to keep her out of the sun. As usual, I made sure she was close enough to see me from across the yard. Somehow at 29, pushing through the overgrown grass, I felt old. I remembered that when I was a kid, I could mow the grass at my parents' house and then mow 2 neighboring houses in about 2 hours without even breathing heavily. I especially liked taking care of the grass at my neighbors' houses because they would pay me. But now I was only halfway through with a much smaller patch of grass and I was exhausted. I almost didn't hear her approach. She was definitely light on her feet. When I heard her, she was only a few feet away from me. I turned around, ready to either fight or grab my daughter and run. She was already sitting in her car seat, and my Mustang was pointed towards the street in her driveway. In the car, I kept copies of all our important documents as well as a good selection of crafts. If necessary, we could be anywhere in a matter of seconds, but there was no need for that now. "Hello, neighbor." She smiled. She was a bigger girl, very large, but she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. There was something almost musical in her voice. She was extremely proportionate for her size, her waist was quite small for a big girl and her was very curvy. Her legs were tight, tanned and shiny with some lotion or oil, and they attracted me like magnets. Her shoes were very tiny, open-toed, and her toenails were painted the same shade as my Mustang. She didn't shy away from my assessment, in fact she seemed to enjoy it. "Welcome to the area," she exclaimed. "I was thinking of coming and meeting you and the woman in your life. If there is anything I can do to help you settle into our small town, just ask." "Then let's meet her," I said. That's when I noticed the tray she was carrying. On the tray were 3 frosted glasses with a nameless liquid. We walked up to the porch and I stopped in front of the car seat. "This is my daughter, Alyssa. I call her Ellie for short." She placed the tray on the porch and looked at my daughter. Ellie's face immediately distorted, her small lips pursed and her eyes became hard, as if the woman had invaded our territory. "Oh my God," the woman exclaimed. "She has the same hair color, your eyes, and even your nose. Does she have any of her mother's traits? Bring the lady of the house here so I can meet her too." "You just met her," I said. "I'm Mike. It's just Ellie and me." "Even better," she chuckled, her smile brightening a little. "I'm Margarita, but you can call me Rita. I saw you working in the yard and thought I'd invite you 2 to dinner on my deck later." "We'd really like to," I said, "if it's not too much trouble." She smiled and reached for the forgotten tray. "And since you're working out here in the heat, I brought you some of my famous water." "No, stupid," she smiled. "This is my world-famous lemonade." In that second everything changed. The birds seemed to stop singing. I was noticeably tense. Ellie's face turned red and she began to cry, reaching for me. As soon as it started, I said, "What happened?" Confused. "I think she sunbathed too much," I spat. "I'm going to take her inside." But she said something behind me as I grabbed my daughter and ran into our house. It took me almost an hour to calm Ellie down. I fed her, cleaned up the milk she had spilled, and then did her favorite thing. I picked her up and carried her around the house, rocking her and telling her her favorite story. It only took 5 minutes for her to fall asleep. When she fell asleep, I put her in her car seat and went to cut the grass. Perhaps I was fueled by anger, or maybe I had tackled the tougher sections earlier, but it didn't take me long to finish the yard. After that, I took out a bucket, pulled out the cart with supplies and washed the car. When I finished, I heard two things competing for my attention and curiosity. The first was the sound of Ellie waking up on the porch and calling for me, trying to get out of her car seat. Ellie could walk as well as any 2-year-old, but she couldn't unbuckle her car seat. That had saved her from trouble more times than I could remember. As I was rescuing my daughter from her car seat, I heard a second thing that piqued my curiosity: the sound of soft piano music coming from the house next door. I wondered if Rita played the piano. I went up to the second floor of our house and looked out the window into the neighboring yard. Her yard, unlike mine, was beautifully decorated. It had a very nice terrace and what appeared to be a jacuzzi. Rita was lying on a sun lounger on the terrace. She was wearing a very revealing swimsuit. Despite her size, she was reading some documents and seemed to be taking notes on them. I got the impression that perhaps she was a teacher grading papers. Another thing supporting this theory was the glasses she wore on the tip of her beautiful nose. She looked around as if her chest had sensors and she could tell someone was watching her. Her dark red hair sparkled in the setting sun, and the expression on her heart-shaped face was angelic. I started to feel bad about the way I had treated her earlier. "Are you hungry, Ellie?" I asked my daughter. "Hungry," Ellie said. I picked her up in one arm and headed into our backyard. I knocked on the high fence between our yards and said loudly, "Hey." A few seconds later, I heard the sound of something being dragged towards the fence. Then I saw Rita's beautiful head peeking over the top of the fence. She smiled slightly. The way her nose wrinkled amazed me. Her eyes were huge, the brightest brown eyes I had ever seen. Her long eyelashes and perfect bow-shaped lips made it impossible to take my eyes off her. "Mike, can you hear me?" she asked. "Isn't the music too loud? Why are you looking at me like that?" I shook my head to clear it and then told her, "Rita, I came to apologize for the way I acted earlier. In fact, it had nothing to do with you. I think I was remembering something from her past and it scared me." She smiled. "But I'm a tough girl. You didn't really do anything wrong. It happens. People are different. Trust me, I know. Not everyone likes me." So isn't it too late for that dinner you promised us?" I asked. "I didn't promise." She objected with a smile. "I proposed and you accepted." I replied with a smile in return, "So here I go." I handed Ellie over the fence and Rita was surprised but took her. Then I climbed over the fence to her loud laughter. "Wow, you must be really hungry," she laughed. "Hungry," Ellie exclaimed. "I'll change into something more comfortable while you fire up the grill," Rita said. "You don't have to change for me," I offered. She handed Ellie to me and headed towards her house. I put my daughter on the chaise lounge where Rita had just been lying. I walked over to the grill, which was a small gas grill. It didn't have a start, but it wasn't hard to figure out. I turned on the gas using the valve attached to the gas cylinder, and then lit the burner using a lighter that was on the shelf next to the grill. A few minutes later, Rita returned with a couple of very tasty-looking steaks and corn. The steaks were already seasoned and marinated. I looked at her with suspicion. "You knew I'd be back," I said. "I took a chance." She smiled. I turned around and saw my daughter trying to get her feet off the lounge chair. Her feet touched the deck and she fell on her before standing up. She walked as quickly as possible to the edge of the terrace. I turned quickly to see what had caught her attention. Curled up in the corner of the terrace on a large pillow was a large cat. Ellie walked up to the cat and introduced herself. "Ellie the cat," she said proudly. Then she got down on one knee and started petting the cat and giggling. "Don't worry, it won't hurt her. She's a very old, very kind cat," Rita said. I placed the steaks on the grill, and Rita and I sat down to watch Ellie play with her friend as the sun set. We had a good time and the conversation flowed freely. The playful exchanges between Rita and me were evidence of our almost instant attraction. She was very open, and I often found myself getting lost in her big brown eyes. Sometimes her words were so funny and honest that I was sure I was falling in love with her. I left once to go home to get Ellie's favorite food. I brought her chicken nuggets, which I heated up on the grill, and applesauce for dessert. I also brought green beans, although she usually has to be distracted or very hungry to eat those. Surprisingly, this time I was even able to convince her not to come home with me. "Ellie, let's go home for dinner, honey," I told her. "Ellie, cat," she said firmly. Apparently the look on my face was priceless. Ellie had never chosen something over me before, and the cat surpassed me. "Relax, Mike," Rita said. "I won't let anything happen to her in those 3 minutes until you run home and bring her dinner." My look must have been skeptical because she kept talking. If only she knew what a leap of faith it was for me to trust her. But for some reason I was sure that I could trust Rita. I was about to climb back over the fence when I heard her laugh behind me. I turned around, and the laughter reflected in those brown eyes stole my heart again. "I don't think you should look at me while you're climbing back over the fence, but wouldn't it be easier to use the gate?" She laughed. "What gate?" I asked naively. She pointed, and I saw a gate only 10 feet from where I was trying to climb over. "You know what's about 3 feet from your gate on my side?" she asked. I shrugged, still lost in her eyes. "Your gate," she laughed. I went to the gate, opened it and closed it behind me. As she said, the gate in her fence was very close to mine, which I had not noticed before. I quickly made it to the kitchen and brought back everything Ellie needed for dinner. While Ellie ate, we continued talking. Rita told me about herself. She grew up in an ordinary family in Florida and thought there was nothing special about her. Her breasts started growing at an early age and never stopped. After college, she couldn't find a job and started modeling. "I know this will shock you," she said shyly, "because of my body." "Not at all," I replied. "I can totally imagine you as a model." "Mike, no you couldn't," she said. It was humiliating. It wasn't modeling, I was mostly modeling lingerie. I was very embarrassed. The money was good, but as soon as I had the opportunity to leave, I did. My current job allows me to stay clothed and use the degree I worked so hard to earn in college. I'm the editor of a women's lifestyle magazine. She looked at me and waved her hand in front of my face. I'm so bored that fell asleep listening to me. "Huh?" she asked. "No, Rita," I said, smiling. "You are so beautiful that I fall into a trance looking at you." She suddenly burst out laughing and didn't stop until she noticed that I wasn't laughing. "Mike, I'm fat," she said. "I think you're perfect the way you are," I told her. As if to prove that women are the most incomprehensible creatures on earth, she smiled, but at the same time a tear rolled down her cheek and those beautiful eyes, into which I had looked all day, lost a little of their shine. Her next move was clearly an attempt to change the mood. "Mike, I think the steaks are ready," she said, "and I think we should probably eat at your place." I looked where she was pointing and saw Ellie quickly falling asleep with one arm on Rita's satisfied cat. "I'll get the food, you put the baby to bed," she said. Even as I said this, I felt a tremble. I picked up my sleeping daughter and carried her home. I put her in bed and placed one of her favorite stuffed animals next to her. As usual, I left her room door open and turned on the hallway light in case she got up in the middle of the night. I also turned on the baby monitor. Since Ellie could talk and walk, I didn't really need a monitor, but I used it anyway. I went into the kitchen looking for Rita and didn't find her. She was sitting on the sofa in front of my fireplace. I wondered why there was a fireplace in a house in Texas. "Can we light it?" she asked. A few minutes later we sat in the dark, illuminated only by the light from the fireplace. The air conditioning kept the Texas heat at bay and prevented the fire from making the house any hotter. "It's so romantic," she said. "This makes everything worse." "What's worse?" I asked. "Mike, I'm a good woman," she said, looking at me as if she was hurt. "What you want won't happen today." She moved closer to me and laid her head on my shoulder. "Mike, I haven't told you everything," she said. "I missed a lot of details. After college, finding a job was difficult. All the offers I got sounded tempting, but the pay was so low that I didn't even realize how bad some people could be. A lot of the guys I met promised me mountains of gold." Another tear escaped and her voice wavered. I hugged her tighter. "Mike, most of them just wanted one thing. The worst was the guy who had been dating me for a few weeks. He painted the most beautiful pictures of our future. We were going to do this and that. He was old-fashioned like me, so we got engaged after a year of our relationship. I put everything into it and I really thought I loved him. We dated for about a month. When I finally went to bed with him, there was no second night. The next morning, I woke up with a heart full of love that I could barely contain. The next day at work, I found out that I was of all the jokes. Every guy in the studio was staring at me and making snide remarks. I tried to call him, but his number always went straight to voicemail. During lunch break, Brenda dragged me into the women's room and told me that my boyfriend had told everyone we were dating, and that he slept with me. He shared everything they wanted to know about my body, including some things that weren't true. Even though we were best friends, Brenda had a hard time telling me the rest. That idiot had somehow secretly placed his cell phone on the table next to the bed and recorded a video. He posted the online, and I literally had to sue him to get him to take it down. He told everyone about it. I haven't dated since then, or at least I haven't because I lost the ability to trust people. I know I'm a big fat cow, but I have feelings too. I've often heard that for every guy who treats women badly there's some woman who made him that way, but Mike, there are a lot of really bad men too. I have a feeling that I like you. You're not like other guys. I see that you are also looking at my breasts, which is probably normal for men, but you spent a lot of time today looking at my face and you like it. But if you want to know me, and I really hope you do, you'll have to take the time to sleep with me. She seemed almost sad as she said this. Mike, I like you too, she said and squeezed my hand as if trying to emphasize her words. But we need to move very slowly because I don't want to get hurt again. I then laughed and her beautiful face distorted. I stood up and walked away from her. When I returned, she was standing and collecting her things. Where are you going? I asked. I told you my sad little story and you couldn't wait to leave, she said. It made me sad, but it seemed like you're just another guy who thought a fat girl was so desperate for love that she'd be an easy target. Rita, you're starting to annoy me, I said. A woman is beautiful, as you should have more confidence. So let's go back to your seat. Where's my place really, she asked, raising one eyebrow. Right next to me, wherever I am, I said. She smiled one of those brilliant smiles and walked up to me in front of the fire. Rita, I'm sorry for what happened to you. That guy was a real jerk, but there are plenty of them on both sides of the fence, and you don't have a monopoly on heartache. Honey, I'm glad you told me your story, but you have to believe that not all the people you meet are the same. You have to learn to trust again. Rita, do you know why I got up a few minutes ago? I went to check on Ellie. It's in my blood. I always check on her. I get up in the middle of the night to check on her and then go back to bed. I should have told you where I was going, darling. What I'm about to say could get me into a lot of trouble, but I trust you, so I'll take the risk. I've never trusted anyone with this before, so this should give you an idea how I feel about you. I work for the city. I'm a civil engineer. I'm still learning at this job in Dallas. It's a little different than doing the same job back in Michigan, but I guess each city is different. I'm 29 now, so yes, I'm a couple of years younger than you, and that doesn't matter at all to me. But when I started, I was 26 and fresh out of college. Yes, I didn't get my degree until I was 24. I went to college for 6 years to get a 4-year engineering degree. I'm not a fool. The first 2 years I studied to be a football player and a funny guy. I was sure I was going to go to the NFL, so I didn't even consider other options. I didn't have a plan B. During my sophomore year, I suffered an injury that sidelined me for 3 months and ended all my hopes of playing professional football. In retrospect, it was a good thing, and it's even better that it happened when it did. It was a hard pill to swallow, but my parents raised me right. It took me a while to be able to look at my old game films and see that I could never succeed. I played football every day from the age of 5 until the day I got injured. I spent 15 damn years sacrificing everything for the football gods. Lots of people do this. There are states like Ohio that are real football factories. I like it here, but Texas is kind of like that too. In any case, there are many players who are great at the college level but turn out to be failures at the professional level. I can think of Joey Harrington, Rodney Peete, Tim Tebow, and several recent Michigan QBs who all fit that profile. Anyway, I was one of them. I had a lot of coaches and mentors who built me up and inflated my ego, hoping for a piece of the pie when I turned pro. But when I reviewed my game notes after the injury, it became clear to me that I looked ridiculous on the field. When I returned to school after my injury, I realized that I had wasted 2 years. Most of the classes I took were useless. I wasn't even serious enough to choose a major. If you look at colleges today, the situation is the same. Any athlete who lists general education as their major but does not take English or math classes is likely majoring in their sport. So after I graduated, I decided to stay in Michigan. I liked it there. I liked the change of seasons. I loved that I could fish and water ski all summer and enjoy tropical places in the summer, then do whatever I wanted in the snowbelt states in the winter. Winter, spring, and fall in Michigan have to be seen to be believed. People from all over the world go there to enjoy the colors, but damn, I probably won't be going back anytime soon. Here I was, working in the Detroit suburbs where I was sent 2 years after college. The state was building a new freeway ramp. We had mapped all affected homes in the area, but some people who were planning to stay in their homes would also be affected. We had to reroute or relocate many power lines, gas lines, telephone lines, and sewer pipes to make way for the freeway. It was in one of these houses that I met her. I got out of the truck with our crew to inform her that we would be marking gas pipes and underground utilities on her property. She appeared to be a woman in her mid to late 30s. She said she was 32, but I found out much later that she had lied to me, and it was one of the least significant lies. She looked like your average early middle-aged woman. She really didn't stand out at all. You meet such women on the street every day. Her hair was shoulder-length, light brown, and inconspicuous. She also wore glasses with heavy eye makeup under them, which looked rather strange. On the day we started working on her property, she was smoking on the porch of her little ranch house. She looked at me and continued to look. It was strange. Even when it caught her eye, she didn't look away. She even came over to find out what I was doing while my guys were putting up flags and markers or testing the ground to find out the location of certain objects. I was measuring the area so I could draw a detailed updated map of the site. After a while, she was as close to me as you are now. She wasn't shy about her body or her several tattoos, and there's something about a woman over 30. She returned to the house and came back with a glass. "Would you like some of my famous lemonade?" she asked. I thanked her and drank it. It was sweltering outside and that lemonade was really good. "Do you want more?" she asked after I had emptied the first glass. "I don't want to cause you any trouble," I said. "It's no trouble at all, dear," she said, walking back into the house. As soon as she left, my guys started teasing me. "Are you going to see her now, or will you come back later?" asked my foreman, Ronald Donnell. Everyone just called him Mac. "What are you talking about, Mac?" I asked. "Mike, that old maid's got it out for you," he laughed. "Hey, she's not that old," I said. "She's only 32. Everyone started laughing at that too. She spent the entire evening flexing and posing in front of me while my guys couldn't help but laugh. For a lonely young man, such attention was flattering. When it was time to clean up, she directly offered me dinner. "Don't you think that after you're done, you'll want to come back and save the old lady the pain of having dinner alone?" she asked. "I'm not used to eating dinner alone. I won't pressure you, but I just thought that since we're both single and I don't like eating alone, I'd invite you. There are no obligations and I don't expect anything from you. If it's inconvenient, well, I don't want to put pressure on you. If you come, we'll eat, but if not, well, okay." My guys were making fun of me the whole way back to the office, and they didn't even know about her invitation to dinner. But despite their jokes, I returned after work. It was probably because I was young and lonely, so the prospect of a free dinner and implied intimacy was pretty hard to turn down. When I arrived at her house, she was sitting on a lawn chair on the front porch. She reached into the beer she was drinking and pulled out a glass of lemonade, as if she was sure I would come. I took the glass and had a sip. "That famous lemonade attracts them every time," she chuckled. "Why do you call it famous?" I asked. "Honey, that's just what I call it," she said. "It doesn't mean anything. I doubt anyone outside of my friends and family has ever heard of me, let alone my lemonade. But the thing is, everyone likes to think they're special. We all want to think there are one or two things we're better at on this big blue marble. And I'm just another stalk of grass in the big backyard. I can only name 2 things that I'm really good at. I'm really, really good at 2 things. So what?" I began to speak. She smiled and didn't even wait for me to finish the question. She had been leading me on this point since we met this morning. Lemonade and intimacy, she said without smiling. She said it in the same matter-of-fact tone as if I had said my Mustang's exhaust as loud as hell. I was shocked. I almost choked on the lemonade I had just taken. She waited until I could breathe again before asking the next question. You tasted the lemonade, she said, smiling. Would you like to try the other part? The rest of that evening remained a blur. I don't remember anything except her question the next day during lunch. Details began to come back to me. She woke me up in the morning to find out what time I needed to be at work. 9, I said, exhausted. Okay, she replied. That gives us a couple of hours. I left at 7:30 to go home and shower before going to work. When will you come back, she asked. I was confused. I don't remember saying I'd be back. Look, I began. Leanne, she said, smiling. And your name is Mike, right? I nodded. Mike, I know I said no strings attached, but last night was special for me. Do you really have anything better tonight than what we just did? I thought about it and in less than a second replied no. I promise you dinner this time too, she said. How about we grill something? Sounds good, I said. Then she kissed me. I returned to my apartment, took a shower and changed into fresh clothes. I felt like something a dog had buried and then dug up. I was exhausted, but I was young and shaking all over. I had just had one of those nights that men talk about forever. I didn't say a word about what happened to the guys at work. I spent the day thinking about it, and in the light of day I had to admit there were some things I didn't like about that night. We didn't waste time talking. In fact, every time I tried to ask her something she changed the subject. This meant that either she had something to hide or, like me, was only interested in intimacy and not in relationships. But it made sense. Why would an older woman like her, who owns her own home, be interested in someone as young as me? However, youth had its advantages, and by the time I finished work, I was already looking forward to our next meeting. How surprised I was when a very beautiful girl opened the door. She looked about my age or a little younger. We looked at each other and I swear something happened. Leanne came to the door before we could say anything and grabbed my hand. I see you have met my daughter, she said. I was taken aback. However, I remembered my manners and came up with a lie to buy time while my brain rebooted. Are you sure she's your daughter? I asked. You don't seem old enough to have a daughter that old. She's not that old, stupid, Leanne said. She's only 20. Lynn and I walked back to the porch. As we approached, 2 dirty boys about 7 and 10 or so, jumped out onto the porch and ran into the house. My chin dropped and Leanne simply smiled. Are they yours too? I asked. She nodded. God, how many children do you have? I asked. Only 5, she said. The other 2 are visiting Aunt Kate for the summer. She has a farm. They will be home in about 3 weeks. I didn't even say anything. I was too shocked. Okay, let's get the grill going, she said. Mom, I'm going home, Brittany Jean said. I'll call and let you know I'm on my way before I get home. I lit the grill and Leanne brought out a couple of great steaks and some burgers, steaks for us.